It's so funny. I'm running tech on all of these panels, and I have either muted myself, seen cats fly across my screen, or completely forgotten to bring guests into the studio. I'm a professional, but don't try this at home. Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine Hecht. I'm the Executive Director of the Alexander Valley Film Society, and you are joining us live for the 6th Annual Alexander Valley Film Festival. Tonight's panel is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation of Northern Sonoma County. We have a very special guest, Kim Bender, the Executive Director, who's going to be moderating our panel tonight. And a shout out to a couple of our other significant sponsors, Alain Pire and Johnny Drake, Your Compass and a Complex Real Estate Market, and longtime friends Ron and Jane Pavelka of Pavelka and Associates. So tonight has been a long anticipated evening for us. We have gathered around the table, proverbially speaking, a collection of incredibly smart, capable people who have so much good information to share, not the least of which is an incredible film that if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, it should be the absolute next on your list, A Place to Breathe. We have the filmmakers in the studio with us tonight, as well as 2 healthcare professionals working here locally in Sonoma County. But without further ado, please help me welcome our moderator, Kim Bender. Kim, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Wow, A Place to Breathe is such a skillfully made film that reminds us that we are, in fact, a nation of immigrants. And we've always been a place for asylum for people for so many reasons from the beginning. Thank you, Robin and Michelle, for making this beautiful film that spotlights the plight of contemporary immigrants today and what it means to come to a country for safety. Which is really what this is about. And the key role that healthcare workers can provide in making people feel safe. So thank you. This is a wonderful, peaceful film in a really difficult subject area. And I just commend you for the tone and for the use of animation. That really makes it an experience that you can take in and really celebrate in the end. So thank you so much.
Oh, let's bring them in. Shall we bring them in?
Let's do. Hi, guys. So I'm going to make what the format for this evening is. I'm going to introduce our guests. Then I have a few intro questions to ask them, and we'll engage in a conversation, and then we'll have a Q&A for a total of about 45 minutes. But if we're on a roll, Catherine says she'll let us go a little longer, but you can plan on 45 minutes or so. All right. Well, the director and producer, Michelle Grace Steinberg, right below me, combines for this film her sensibilities as a filmmaker and healthcare professional. Her previous films are Beyond Recognition, which she made in 2014, and her first film, Buried Voices, in 2012. Michelle is also a nutritionist at Street Level Health Project in Oakland, where she works collaboratively with medical and mental health practitioners to provide free, culturally responsive care to uninsured communities. She's on the board of directors at the Integrative Medicine for the Underserved and won the American Herbalist Guild 2015 Award for Diversity and Inclusion. Michelle received a bachelor's degree from Wesleyan University in cultural anthropology and a master's degree in human nutrition from the University of Bridgeport. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
And Robin Majkowski, my friend, has spent the past 20 years engaging Bay Area youth through media arts, music, and theater education, rather. Throughout this time, she's been constructing dozens of hands-on project-based workshops, developing curricula, and collaborating with Bay Area arts and community-based organizations. She's worked at places such as the UC Theater in downtown Berkeley, Youth Uprising, and the San Francisco 9th Street Film Center, where we met. She also co-produced Beyond Recognition, the previous film, in collaboration with Michelle Grace Steinberg. Robin has designed sound for independent films that have screened at film festivals around the globe. She received her BA in audio and video production from San Francisco State University and holds a master's in education with a focus on technology from Harvard Graduate School of Education. So welcome, Robin. Yay. And we have 2 more guests. Are we going to let them in now, Catherine?
Absolutely.
Hi, guys. So I'm reading these bios because they're really important, and I want to get them right. So thanks for your patience. And Michael has a really impressive resume. So Dr. Michael Valdovinos was born in Santa Rosa to immigrant parents from Michoacan, Mexico. He's the only bicultural, bilingual, board-certified, trained clinical and organizational psychologist in Sonoma County, which is amazing. He got his undergraduate degree in Chicano Studies and Psychology at UC Davis, and his Doctor of Psychology degree from the California School of Professional Psychology in Los Angeles. Dr. Valdovinos is a former active duty U.S. Air Force officer and psychologist with extensive domestic and international experience. He pioneered the use of telemedicine and virtual reality exposure therapies to treat trauma to the U.S. Air Force, and specialized in the recovery and reintegration of prisoners of war. Wow. He's held positions at the Palo Alto Veterans Affairs Hospital, been a consultant to Stanford University. He's had an academic appointment at Cornell University in New York, and has built award-winning trauma apps for National Geographic, Google, and created national nature therapy programs for the Sierra Club. He is currently the core faculty and co-director of behavior medicine at the UCSF Sutter Family Medicine Residency. And maybe the most interesting thing that Michael does, of all these impressive credentials, is that he hosts a speaking health and wellness radio program right here in Sonoma County on FM 89.1 KBBF, Tuesdays at 2 on a weekly basis, with largely monolingual Spanish-speaking audience of 20 to 30,000 people every week, which is amazing. He remains deeply committed to addressing healthcare inequities and to the Latinx and Indigenous communities of Northern California. So welcome, Michael. And last but not least, Dr. Juana Alvarez is a nurse practitioner with 19 years of experience. She works alongside a medical team at Alliance Medical Center, who's a grantee of the Healthcare Foundation, consulting patients who are mostly immigrants from Latin America. In fact, 70% are Spanish speaking. She is the diabetes provider champion and member of the diabetes case management team for the medical center. Dr. Alvarez has a doctoral degree in nursing practice with a specialty as a family nurse practitioner from the University of South Alabama, as well as a second specialty as an adult acute care nurse from California State University, Los Angeles. So welcome, everyone. Yay, what an amazing group of people. Thank you so much.
And I will now bow out to the back, but if you need anything, I'll be right here.
Okay, thanks. So we're going to go ahead and ask a few questions of each of you guys. I'll start with director, producer, Michelle. Could you tell us a little bit how this film came about? And it's a film of two cities, Oakland and Lowell, Massachusetts. How did these two clinics in these two cities, how did that happen?
So I think the film had been percolating in me for quite some time. I've spent the last 11 years working as a nutritionist and herbalist at Street Level Health Project, which is one of the clinics in the film. And really just the amazing resilience and power that I see in my patients and in my colleagues there was fomenting stories that I wanted to put together. And when we were at a film festival for our last project, I stumbled across a Public Radio International piece about Meta Health Center in Lowell, Massachusetts, that just sort of knocked me out as far as looking at the type of culturally responsive care that they had pioneered back in 2000. Working in that situation, they had primarily started in response to the Cambodian and Laotian communities, particularly the Cambodian community that had been coming post Khmer Rouge. And then it blossomed into a space for refugee communities from all over the world. And so it became apparent to me that I felt like the stories balanced each other. It was really important to me that we include people with all different types of immigration status, but yet without really focusing on that status, because that status is a construct, and it's a construct that very deeply impacts people's lives and experiences. But nonetheless, their humanity is so much larger than that, and the commonalities between their stories and experiences are so much larger than that. And so, so when I reached out to Meta Health Center, I think it definitely helped that I reached out as much as a healthcare provider who felt a real connection to the work that they were doing because of the work that we were doing at street level, as much as a filmmaker. And so Sonnet Pugh, who is the amazing director of Meta Health Center at the time, was excited to start to pursue the conversation and look into creating the film. And so from there, it sort of blossomed, and we spent 4 years making the film. We did about 8 trips out to Massachusetts, following our characters over time and looking at their adjustments. Meanwhile, sort of simultaneously filming here in Oakland, where Robin and I both live, you know, at our clinic. And so yeah, that's how it came about.
It works amazingly well and surprisingly well. So thank you. Robin, tell us a little bit what about the production challenges of working in 2 cities across the country and the multiple languages. How did you handle that?
Well, as Michelle mentioned, we took 8 trips across the country over the course of probably 2.5 years of production wise. And keep in mind the production team is me and Michelle. So that meant we had to bring all of our equipment with us through security on the plane, carrying it. And we were really limited to what we can bring. So there was that physical aspect of it. In addition to the fact that Michelle was not only director producer, she also was cinematographer in there while I was location recording as well as producer. So having to have everyone signed media release forms on top of holding the boom in there as Michelle's trying to direct and move the camera around and position it. So we were, you know, a small but mighty team that was able to get through. So that there was that challenge. The language, we were really fortunate to be connected because both health centers have interpreters, and Michelle at street level regularly works with a mom-speaking interpreter, Norma, who's in the film, and now with a woman, Mari Vicente. And then the same thing, and the clinic in Lowell, Massachusetts, that there are people who are there as interpreters. So they really helped with the any sort of language barrier, and particularly in Lowell, telling the parents of Sochi, the Cambodian immigrants' story, with that and working with that. And that was, you know, a challenging thing. And that the woman who was doing the interpretation herself is also a Cambodian refugee and worked at the health center. So there was also with that, because it's not only bilingual or multilingual 2 countries, but it's also here we're telling asking people to share their trauma stories and what does it mean for the interpreter to be part of it, particularly if they've had a shared experience. So those were things that we were really mindful as well, and tried to do our best to ensure that people were okay afterwards as best as we possibly could. And there was a lot of, you know, starting and stopping and making sure that people felt comfortable is not the right word, but making sure that they felt, I guess, safe to be able to continue with it, as difficult as that is. So yeah, quite a lot of challenges with it. And I just kind of look back watching it now, I'm all like, oh my God, Michelle, we totally did this production in 2 different cities across the country. Where some similar types of films have like a whole field team in a different locations. So yeah.
Nice.
Can I
Thank
add
you.
something quickly about the languages? So we have, I guess, 5 or 6 languages in the film, and so I'm fluent in Spanish. So the things that were in English and Spanish were. So I was also the editor, the main editor, and so things that were in Spanish or English were fine. And then with mom, I had the gift of having Maria Vicente, who was our mom interpreter, or that I work closely with now, but not the mom interpreter who was working at the clinic in the film, came and sat with me to help do those parts of it. And then likewise, dealing with the interpretation, we had sort of a long distance relationship with our Khmer interpreter during the editing process. And then Swahili was another, in French. And so it was, as Robin said, I don't even understand how we finished it, but it was a really interesting adventure. But I think I just want to point out that one thing that was really important to us was that in the scenes where community health workers and interpreters, so when we have Norma speaking in Spanish to Cadelba or Doris, translating from the mom, from the indigenous Mayan Guatemalan language, or when we have Lorna speaking Swahili and translating into English, it was very intentional that we did not subtitle those sections where the patient was speaking their first language, but instead the sections with the interpreter, because as I'm sure Michael and Juana maybe have experienced, you get so much information from a patient's body language, from their expressions, and it's really important to be present for hearing that part of it as well. And the language, of course, is hugely important, but being present, even if you don't have that language, and the experience of what it feels like to be working with an interpreter who, again, is not just translating language, but is often a cultural broker. So that was part of it.
Yeah. Thank you. Great choice. Juana, you're a family nurse practitioner that treats literally thousands of immigrant patients every year at Alliance Medical Center in Windsor and Healdsburg. What did you see in this film that felt similar to what you see at Alliance?
What I saw that is very similar is the fact that our patient population comes from different countries. They share different cultures, even though they're speaking the same language, Spanish. Some of them also speak dialects.
Mm-hmm.
And when they come here, they bring their passions about wanting to make a better life over here, and they're running away from different circumstances that are not necessarily political, but it's also economical. So when they come here, they have this big dream of making US their home. And they wish that they could be one to be telling later on that their American dream lives in them.
Thank you. Michael, as a bilingual, bicultural, clinical, and organizational psychologist, can you talk a little bit about the mental health challenges facing immigrants today and in our area, especially with COVID and the recent fires?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think first and foremost, I want to go back to something Michelle said a second ago, because she was referring to, I think, the clinicians in the clinics in terms of their power and resilience, and I completely agree with her. I also want to say, though, that our patients that I treat and that like Juana treats and the ones in the film also carry a tremendous amount of power and resilience. And so as I talk about some of the challenges that they face from a mental health perspective, I also want to make note that these people are just incredible human beings that have come through, and some are overcoming or have overcome just horrendous circumstances. And so what we see in Sonoma County, or what I see, discrimination, disruption of social support systems, stigma. A lot of our folks carry there's two types of traumas that we think about. We think about, a single incident trauma is like, let's say you get robbed at a bank, right? And then nothing ever happens to you again. That's quote unquote traumatic. A lot of our population carries what we call complex trauma, which is more than one traumatic event, right? And that could be, it doesn't have to be, stereotypically we think about it in terms of violence, but it doesn't just have to be that, right? And so a lot of our folks come to the United States carrying those, that heavy toll with them, right? And which makes their life here even that much more difficult. And then, when they seek treatment, that is something that we then, address and try to treat. But oftentimes it's longer standing. Here in the States, there's still a continued lack of cultural competency, I think, within our health centers and our health systems, which I think have impact on folks' mental health. The other thing too that's a consequence of COVID, and especially the fires right now, is that when folks lose their jobs, it's very hard for people to meet their basic needs, right? And basic needs being sort of security, housing, food, a warm place to live. Well, oftentimes we think, well, yeah, I think, you can make rent, you can buy some food, but without income, it's really hard to do that. And without having, your basic needs met, it's really hard to do everything else, like, trying to build relationships, trying to access good health care. It just makes your life that much more difficult. And what we've seen as a consequence of the fires is that, especially up in the Cloverdale, Healdsburg area, Geyserville area, a lot of people lost their jobs. It's estimated that between about 15 to 20% of the grapes up there were picked, which means that a lot of people for the next 6 months, I mean, we're talking, about 1,000, 2,000 families at least are, aren't going to be able to rely on that income for the next 6 months, which is a big, big deal for folks. And so, these types of challenges have a huge impact on folks' mental health. And what we, unfortunately and consequently, what we end up seeing is increased rates of depression, anxiety, adjustment issues, and then, PTSD. And, and we're hopeful that folks come into the clinics to get care for that, because I do believe that in Sonoma County, we have access to healthcare, but I think there still needs to be more integration between, folks who, for a number of different reasons, don't seek it, or maybe don't know how to, or are ambivalent about it. And then, sort of the health centers that are there saying, if you build the field, they will come. Well, that often doesn't happen, right? We need to continue to do more work around that to meet both the physical and mental health needs of our community.
Yeah, Michelle, I had a question that you may have answered. You successfully wove these stories together between the Cambodian refugees and the Congolese family and the healthcare workers, the DACA healthcare workers, and the Guatemalan woman who had the ankle bracelet, which I found to be one of the most disturbing moments in the whole film. It was so upsetting to see that. I think you said you already answered, actually. You took 4 years to really get those stories, and I just commend you for staying in the stories, because as a viewer, it was so wonderful to have some arc to it, to see some resolution to all of their stories. It was quite remarkable and unexpected, actually.
Yeah, I think it was really, really just a privilege to be able to make a long form film. It was trying and challenging and exhausting, but nothing compared to what the people who were sharing their stories have lived with. And I think that long form documentary just give us the opportunity to trace somewhat of a sense of life over time. And I think particularly in stories like this, where, we're sort of, the key for us in this story is really the idea that people come here carrying this trauma, but with this power and resilience that Michael was also referring to, they then can create not only lives for themselves, but healing in their communities. And so that was really sort of looking at that arc of, of having carried those experiences, and then bringing, as Sonnet says in the film, really healing through helping others heal. Is a really big piece of it. And that happens over time. That doesn't happen right away. And I feel like a lot of times, obviously healthcare and immigration are really important topics in this country right now and in the media, but a lot of times we get these sort of quick snapshots of situations. And I think that the kinds of change that we need to see happen at this point in history come through a real sense of empathy and understanding of human struggles. And I don't think that those come as quick snapshots as much as they really come as from a sense of listening and hearing and having the time and space to absorb what people have gone through and the changes that it has brought to them. In addition, I would just say that a major part of the film is the idea of community. We really struggled as filmmakers with the sense that a lot of Western documentary style is based on the individual. People want, funders want individual stories. And this story was never going to be told exclusively through one character. It needed all of these different people's experience. But in addition, all of these people come with their community. And, this is something we had worked with and experienced on our last film, Beyond Recognition, which was about a Native Ohlone woman and her community, is the idea that I think it's a very sort of Western idea to think of extracting the individual. And there's the collective. And then when you look at something like trauma and healing, a lot of times that does not come unless there is this sense of community and collective. And I think that, in addition to that, I think that as a healthcare provider, I see that separation happen in healthcare also, because we try to turn people's health and wellness into an individual question, as opposed to also connecting it to a sense of community and the impact of isolation, particularly when people are coming here from their home, from a different home, and trying to build a new place to live in a different context. But that sense of community has also been uprooted. And so for that reason, we really tried to be out seeing situations where that healing was happening in a community environment as well as in the clinical room.
I think you did a great job at that showing. Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. Each of the characters too are on a different part. They're different part of the healing cycle too, and I think that helps with the overall story arc. So they're each at a different phase of it, and that was really intentional in the editing aspect of how we were constructing the stories over time. So that's what we kept on going back to that as
super skillful. And I appreciate that you showed people's food and their culture, their dance, their families. That was really, it's great to hear that was what you were thinking and what was behind that. I'm going to turn it to Juana for a minute. Juana, I know that at Alliance you practice culturally responsive care. What are some of the challenges for you that you're seeing on the ground at Alliance with your patients? And how have you responded, and how is Alliance responding to the COVID crisis and to any new stuff happening around the fires?
Yeah, at Alliance, we immediately had to change our practice, embrace change. So what we did is we launched a program of telemedicine where we are delivering consultations by phone and video. We accommodate this based on the patient's needs and skills to use their phone, because many of them speak Spanish, and they only know how to use their phone to make phone calls.
Right.
So, so we also launched a program where we do automobile COVID triage, and we are testing patients from their automobile. Right. Another program that we have developed is delivery of medicine for our patients who have chronic problems. And also right now because patients, we don't want to have our patients falling behind with their immunizations. We are facilitating this by providing drive-through immunizations. For me, particularly, personally, I had to learn how to deliver healthcare through telemedicine. And one of the biggest challenges, again, patients who only can use their phone to make phone calls. So we are in the process of facilitating the needs of this population by having an assigned person to help them with the system so they can communicate with us by video.
Right.
So we're very excited about these changes. I think that everything that we are doing in the midst of COVID, and when you add the fires and you add loss of job, we all come together, the community comes together, and at the end of all of this, we are building resilience.
Okay, thank you. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your telemedicine discoveries when you were working for the Air Force? What did you learn, and are there things that we can be bringing into our COVID strategies right now?
Yeah, certainly. We were early adopters in this process in the Air Force. I was doing it actually, pioneering a project while I was in Germany to units that were out in the Middle East, and so these were very, very isolated units who, didn't have great connectivity. We were working with clunky systems. There was no Zoom then. There was no Skype. None of that stuff, right? These were big systems, and so that ended up shifting to the VA, where we ended up developing systems where we could actually, see folks in their home. And I think one thing that I learned that was really critical was not to make an assumption that folks have access to technology, right? And even so, with our population, especially with the Latinx and indigenous population, a lot of folks still get their news from radio, right? Not everybody has access to internet or cell phones or computers, where we think of it as sort of like, it's just part of the day, right? Be on Zoom all day. Well, that wasn't a given, even with some of the older veteran populations when I was at the VA. And so what we started to do is we started to think about, well, how do we meet that need, right? How do we still get folks access to healthcare in their homes? And what we ended up doing, and this was a challenging problem to scale, was being able to provide that technology for them when they had appointments. And so through satellite clinics, what we could do is that we found that we could access them better and actually bring them something like an iPad or some sort of form of technology where we could see them remotely, and that we had somebody there, or it was very easy for them just to log on for their appointments, in addition to having these remote clinics where they could come into the clinic. But I think it ended up being a multi-tier approach because, again, one of the biggest learning lessons was just overcoming, technology, and not to assume that folks can either, one, be able to come into clinics depending on where they live, and two, have access to clinics in their homes, because there's a lot of folks around the county who have very choppy internet service or no internet service at all. And so if our main capability is by way of phone or camera or internet, I think we still are missing folks. Folks are dropping in through the cracks.
Right. And I think that Alliance, you guys developed a program with iPads and Drive Up with your Wi-Fi system outside the building, so people can drive up, get the iPad, have an appointment on the iPad with the doctor inside, so they don't have to come in, which is really, again, adapting to what people actually can do.
Right.
Well, I know we're starting to get some audience questions. I did want to touch base for a moment on integrative medicine, which is such a core concept in the film. Michelle, could you just talk a little bit about the concept of integrative medicine, as I know it's part of your practice, and I know, Michael, that we're all thinking about that and but just explain to the audience a little bit about it.
Sure. I think that the term integrative medicine can function on different levels. So there's integrative medicine is used also when we think about, bringing in mental health as well as physical health. And then I think that in our clinic at Street Level Health Project, I think it's integrative medicine first in the sense that we're addressing the whole person and we're addressing social determinants of health. So as Michael mentioned earlier about people not having jobs, not having financial resources, do people have housing, do people have access to food, so I think that thinking in those terms as a part of people's physical health is also integrative. But then there's also a more specific way of thinking of it as far as different modalities, different disciplines and practices working together to sort of use all the tools in the toolbox to address people's healthcare in a variety of ways. So that can include things like, what I do, which is nutrition and herbal medicine. That can include yoga. That can include acupuncture. That can include chiropractic. Again, that includes mental health. That includes people's spiritual well-being, and that absolutely includes their access to food and financial resources and housing. I did just want to comment as far as shifts during COVID. So, our clinic at Street Level Health Project, we're much more of sort of a safety net nonprofit as opposed to a larger structure. But we sort of immediately pivoted so that we focused on, so myself, our mental health providers, and our doctor are all doing phone calls because our folks don't necessarily have access to internet and to a vehicle for which they can do telehealth and do video. So pretty much everything is by phone. And then I'm doing deliveries of herbal medicine and vitamins and supplements every other week to patients. We're also delivering their medicines. We're also doing food bag handouts and food bag deliveries, which we have even not in COVID times, but that's expanded to also for people who don't necessarily have the mobility to bringing it to them. And I just really want to commend my colleagues who created almost immediately a fund because, again, this unemployment that resulted because of the pandemic, communities that don't necessarily have access to federal financial resources or unemployment is devastating. Yeah. And so we have a fund for day laborers where we can actually sort of help financially support people as well. And I just, for Sonoma, want to give a shout out to a really great organization called the Undocu Fund, who has been doing incredible work around that in relation to the fires, I think initially, but now also COVID and then the fires again, but really creating financial resources for immigrant families and immigrant individuals who would not necessarily have access otherwise. And all of those things for me are part of integrative health.
Thank you. First, Catherine, I just want you to know we can't see the chat questions. So if you want to put those up on screen for us, we'll start to answer some of those. But in the meantime, I have a question, and I think it's for the three healthcare practitioners here. When we talk about integrative health and we include things that you just mentioned, Michelle, like meditation and chiropractic, I think, is that a white person idea? Because I can't imagine someone who's struggling to pay rent and put food on the table who doesn't have a job. How are they supposed to integrate yoga into their practice? It seems I'm having a hard time understanding how do we offer that and make it realistic for people who are really struggling to put food on the table. Michael, could you answer that one first?
Yeah, sure. I can take a stab at it. So, I'm sure people will have different practices of how to build awareness around these interventions or these practices and educating folks around this, because I think you're absolutely right, and it's a great question, Kim. There's still stigma that exists around this, even for folks who aren't, in my particular practice, Latinx or Indigenous. I think the concept of yoga is still something that folks grapple with in terms of not only its evidence-based, but which there's clearly lots of, but also like, how do I do this and how is this going to help me? And it feels uncomfortable, it feels different for people. It can feel foreign. But I think one of the ways in which we integrate folks into these types of practices is by paralleling things that they already do in their lives, right? That's not too distinct from something like this. So for instance, meditation and mindfulness and yoga being a little bit more of an active component of this is that we often talk about prayer, right? There's a lot of people in our community who pray. And in a way, and this is not to sort of, not to shift the focus of the actual religion, but prayer is a form of, can be very much a form of meditation and mindfulness, right? And so we like to talk about these things in association with what folks are already doing naturally, or what they're doing, what they do culturally. And so through that, I think you can develop a little bit more of an awareness around, what's the why and the how behind this. And in my experience, I think once folks take that leap and move forward and actually practice, or come to our classes at Santa Rosa Community Health, they have yoga classes too. People really enjoy it. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but I would say that a lot of our patients who do yoga are women, but certainly men also really enjoy it. It might be a function of timing during the day or for lots of other reasons, but by and large, people really enjoy yoga. We make it, what we also do is we make components of the yoga classes active, where there's some talking involved, right? There's, so we kind of tailor it, I think, to aspects of, I think, certainly Mexican culture, where it's connective. There's a little bit of dialogue. There's physical activity involved, and certainly we also educate around how this can help inform practices that are happening at home, like prayer. But we try to make it sort of try to make it familiar versus it being sort of this completely standalone weird concept of something funky you're going to be doing that you've probably never heard of. I think that's when you start getting a lot of separation.
Michelle,
Yeah.
you did an incredible job of portraying people who I thought would not do yoga doing yoga, and it was quite impressive. Do you have anything? I'm sure you have to add to that.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Michael said as far as the familiarity and plugging into, that's really how I approach nutrition, is looking at people's ancestral diets and looking at what comes from their traditions. I do want to take a slightly different approach on your question, though, and say that, okay, so thinking of these things as unfamiliar is one way to think of them. Another way to think of integrative medicine is the idea that there's been a lot of cultural appropriation of things that actually come from immigrant communities initially, right? So yoga is something that comes from the Indian community, of which we have a lot in the United States, but not necessarily, as many people in the Bay Area, perhaps. But then when I think about acupuncture, and I think of, low-income Chinese communities in my area, that is a familiar medicine that has been extracted at times into a boutique type setting. When I think of herbal medicine, as herbalists, we have different traditions and different reference for which medicines we use and where they come from. But indigenous communities in this country have had long histories of, we're the origin of using plant-based medicines. So I just think we have to be careful when we think of whether these things are unfamiliar or whether, as and again, this speaks to what Michael was saying, like the reference that people have in their own cultures that many times have been separated from them when they come here. That's certainly something I've seen, is that, many, I used to teach ESL, and many of my students who were from Mexico were super interested when I started learning about herbalism, because they learned remedios from their abuelitas, and so I think that it's just, that conversation gets really complicated because of sometimes things like cultural appropriation and gentrification.
Yeah, that is so helpful. That's a great perspective. I appreciate that. We have a good question here from Cloverdale. And I think, Juana, maybe you could try on this one. How effective are translators in a mental health context? I'm sure that Michelle and Michael also have something to say on this, but are you in the room at times, or do you have any report for us around how translators are able to help in a mental health context? It seems it's tricky.
Yeah, in the mental health context, I can say, like, for instance, I practiced family medicine. And because I am fluent in Spanish, I don't need a translator. And most of the patients I see, they're Spanish speaking. Now, when it comes to translating for a psychologist, I know that the Spanish-speaking population, they they appreciate very much confidentiality. So if they can do without a translator, that's what they would like to do. And so having not enough psychologists who speak Spanish and are fluent, and not only that, understand their culture, it's a barrier. So it prevents patients from seeking this type of counseling. They might try one time, but then they don't follow up.
Yeah.
That
Thank
is, there is a great need here in Sonoma, and I can speak for Hillsborough, Santa Rosa, these areas. We need more Spanish-speaking behavioral health specialists.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Healthcare Foundation is very much behind that and trying to build that pipeline of mental health professionals to help increase that number. It's so critical.
Can I
Michael?
follow up on that real quickly?
Mhm.
The other thing I think, with, specifically to what's happened after COVID-19 and something that Michelle was just talking about is we've also had to go to a service line where we're primarily calling people on the phone. It seems to be one of the easiest ways to get a hold of folks and engage. And so you can imagine when we are trying to do phone appointments with a translator on the line, especially when you're doing psychotherapy. Well, what often happens, I think Juana was talking about it, not only confidentiality, but you're also talking about so much that's missed, the nuance of seeing somebody, and also cultural context that's missed. And while I want to recognize and be thankful for the fact that we have translators, I also want to totally piggyback on the fact that for those of us who are bicultural and bilingual and doing mental health in Sonoma County, we just get hammered, and there's always, there's such a huge need that, and I'm so thankful that this is starting to, someone's shining a light on it and trying to build pathways and to get more folks in. But absolutely right, it's a huge, huge barrier.
Yeah. I know that I've been hearing from the schools. We support mental health programs in schools, and the providers are saying that students are coming in greater crisis where they used to have an opportunity to speak to someone on campus. Now they're at a crisis level, and it's really a concern. Let's see. We have one more question, and we've been, the time has been flying, everyone. Okay, our final question is, how important is collaboration between agencies to care for the populations? So I think right now, I think that the film speaks greatly to that. Let's just see if we can do a little bit of a round robin with Juana, Michael, and Michelle. We'll close out with Michelle. So Juana, do you collaborate, does Alliance collaborate with other agencies?
Yeah, we collaborate with agencies like to meet our patients' needs, because first of all, we have to meet their basic needs. So we collaborate with the agencies like Food Bank. We also collaborate with other agencies like Corazon that helps patients to with basic needs, with counseling, maybe technological support. We collaborate with WIC, which indeed we have an office there in the clinic, and then we have also donors who help us.
Thank you. Donors. Michael, quick statement about collaboration.
Yeah, I agree with with Juana that certainly we also, I'm familiar with West County and some folks at Petaluma Health, and we tend to work with a lot of the organizations out in the community that are doing, who are addressing things like food and housing. I think that there's also opportunity for healthcare organizations to work more closely with each other, and more opportunity for cross-pollination and collaboration, especially when we're talking about patient care. Folks often go to Kaiser and then they come to us, or vice versa, or they go to Sutter. Just getting records is challenging, right? And to know where they've been, what's been going on. Sometimes when they can't communicate that's a barrier, that's challenging. But I think in a county as small but as big as we are, I think there's still opportunity, and I'm sure this probably exists elsewhere, to work closer together to just again to be more powerful, and meet these needs in a way where we can share resources, we can talk about innovation, we can educate one another on practices and procedures. So many reasons, but I think there's still opportunity.
Thank you. And finally, Michelle on collaboration.
Yeah, I think it's a cornerstone. I mean, I think that any time that you're looking at public health care from a holistic perspective, there are so many different needs, and that can't all be housed in one agency. And that, I hope maybe through this crisis of COVID, we're looking at a moment where agencies are going to be pushed to do more of that collaborating. I don't want to reiterate what Juana and Michael said, but I agree 100% with the types of collaboration they named. I'm just going to add one more to the mix, which, so Street Level Health Project, we also collaborate with Centro Legal de La Raza. And so for the communities that we're talking about, having access to legal resources, having legal clinics that we have occasionally, in our Sala Grande, in our center, or prior to COVID, because we also have a workers collective. So having, lawyers from Centro Legal come in and talk about types, like if people are not getting their wages, what type of wage theft support that they can get. In addition, of course, and most obviously, sort of immigration issues around asylum seeking. So yeah, I think that this collaboration is essential, and I think that we're not really seeing the whole person in front of us if we're not thinking about ways that all of that can happen and work together.
Thank you so much. I think we wanted to put the website for the film up for you guys, so that people can go find out more about what A Place to Breathe, the film, is all about, and more resources, opportunities to screen the film, and so forth. I think that wraps it up, everyone. I'm so grateful for this conversation. Michelle, Robin, Michael, Juana, thank you so much. And Catherine, thank you. I know that we're running out of time, so thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all for a terrifically inspiring conversation. So needed. Please come back. Let's keep talking. All of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
And Kim, if I'm going to put everybody in the waiting room, but Kim, if you would stick around for 1 second.
Sure.
You and I had a conversation not too long ago about this, how film can be this super powerful platform to have these exact kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
And I'm just thrilled that it came to be, and that we got to meet such incredible practitioners. And I hope you're as happy as I am and inspired. Let's do it again.
Very grateful. I love it. It gives us a chance to come together with a story that will really sheds light on and brings alive the issues that we're struggling with in our community, and also gives inspiration. I felt really inspired by this film. So thank you, Catherine, for making it happen.
Absolutely. Well, and for the rest of you, thank you so much for joining us tonight. What an experience to have together. If we can't be together in person, at least we get to have it virtually. So until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and stay connected. Thanks so much.